Test 1, 2.
Okay, welcome to the school committee meeting on Wednesday, March 25th. We're going to call the meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so we do have another budget meeting on the agenda for this evening. As mentioned at previous meetings, we're going to have opportunity for public comment now and going forward. I would appreciate, just by show of hands, are folks here expecting to give public comment tonight, just by show of hands? Anyone who is planning to give public comment? Okay. Well, in that case, we are going to move right into introductions, starting with Counselor Harriman. I almost forgot.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Julia Harper, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Okay, so we are going to move into the presentations and I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. So we are going to continue. Last meeting, we talked, you received a lot of presentations from different areas, and we are going to review the visuals, the tables and the charts from each area. And we will then work to a place where we have some updates for some things that have been asked, and then take information from you and answer any questions you may have. So I move the articles to in order. Sometimes these happen out of order, but because all of the administrators, directors and principals have presented, I want to just move straight through. So cost drivers in Article 3, we have teachers and non-salary, including a new program, which is landscaping, staff supplies, which we've discussed. Substitute additional costs and also workman's compensation. We also found an obsolete stipend that was removed. It's something that was not used last year or this year. And there's a reduction in contracted services. And that's one we've talked about with CTE and adult ed, that math $20,000 contract. This gives you just a visual by chart. You can see that reduction in teacher stipends and the increased cost in substitutes. Again, we're trying to base that on actuals and usage. This shows the dollar increase over time, over last fiscal year. And you can see that the largest increase is connected to our teacher contract and some other non-salary costs, again, tied to those that new program component. In adult education, we'll harp on this more towards the end, but adult education is not in the articles. It is its own separate entity. It's the way the funding works. They do have some contractual increases. They have insurance costs like everyone else. There are some benefits increases, and their overall local impact is up $26,500. I didn't do charts for this one. I can get them for you. It's just a different piece as far as warrant articles are related. So Article 4, we have this particular area is our activities that add to the educational experience of students, but are not accounted for in the same as educational activities in Article 1, which is regular instruction. So in Article 4, we see contractual increases in insurance costs like everywhere else. We also have the Montello extended school year position, which was reclassified to a teaching position, which was moved to Article 1. So you see a reduction. The position still remains. It is slightly modified, but it's in where it should be, which is Article 1. This is one of those grant positions that has continued to carry over from prior conditions, and this particular area of focus is around that extended school year. So this is talking summer school, end of school day programming of that nature. So in Article 4, this is the table that represents the shifts. And just as a reminder, as we read these FY27, so the proposed budget is to the left column. And then you can see FY26 and then the difference with the respective percent change and percent increase or decrease to the budget. And here you can see just that different visualization of that, the teacher of the ES extended school day, extended school year position being relocated to Article 1. And if we go look in Article 1, we'll see the correlating amount of increase based on that position. Yeah.
In Article 4, other instruction, activities that add to the educational experience of students but are not accounted for. Could you give an example of that, what that is?
So the easiest way to do that, probably go into our binders to reference the budget articles. And today, because I'm moving through a bunch of different items, that's just before that tab 1. And when you look at the different articles, it gives you some examples, but Article 4 under other instruction, you can see, for example, personnel, you'll have extended school day and extended school year in different components for K-8 and 9 through 12. Co-curricular, which would be elementary clubs and activities, middle and high school clubs and activities. You also have athletic stipends and some administrative salaries, but not like building admin as much as administrative salaries to carry out the work.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I
Yep.
just wanted it clarified. Thank you.
Sure. In Article 4, other instruction, again, you can see that reduction of teacher costs because it's been moved, different visual for the same information. In Article 5, which is student and staff support, you'll see services provided such as guidance, health, our school resource officers, school health coordinator, professional development library, instructional technology, and student assessments. And in this area, we highlighted some cost drivers, including contractual increases, insurance costs, which we are hopeful to know by the end of the week, which will help inform some next steps for us. We do have 3 school resource officers that work with us. This also includes, if you remember last year, there was a shift to at least one of our nurse positions where we had, we went away from that nurse that floats to the other, it's called by definition an unlicensed school health professional, personnel. And so that position is in there. You'll see that. You see contracted services increase for tutoring. These are students who are receiving tutoring services, typically because they're waiting for an out-of-district placement, or they have had some sort of removal from schools based on numerous factors. But we do provide tutoring services for them. There's an ed tech related to 504, and you can see a reduction in stipends, which is actually based on actuals. One example of that is if we reduce a club or there's no advisor. So year to year, for many years, you would just leave that stipend line alone because it could be tapped because the clubs do exist. And we're reducing so much that we're basing it specifically on actuals. So that could be problematic if a club wants to come back online, but budget-wise, we don't know how to go about it differently. Here's our chart that talks or shows your differences and your percent changes. And in these categories, you see the largest risers of really about staff and a reduction in teacher stipends based on actuals.
Could you just say what's the non-salary? Is that the benefit component or what does that relate to?
Bill wants to come up. I was going to jump in, but
not going to yell across the cafeteria. So non-salary would be excluding salaries and benefits. So that could be supply lines, but also in this one is contracted services as well. So any of those, non-salary like supplies, equipment, if there's utility stuff to go in there.
And here we have the percent increase over last year. And the dollar increase chart. Again, most around personnel. And when I say most around personnel, these are contractual obligations. These are collectively bargained agreements. These are folks landing on the steps where they should be and getting the negotiated raises. Article 6 is system administration. So in this category, you have HR, their office, the business office, my office and related staff, school committee, which doesn't make up a very big portion, but is included in this, also clerical staff. We also have contracted services, fees, and software insurances, things like our legal costs, city services that we pay for, whether it's mutual systems, but we get invoiced from the city when we use part of their systems that we pay them for. Our audit, any conference fees, our accounting system, like we use the Munis software. We also have liability insurance, things of that nature. And also for non-salary, we have supplies, phones, mail, those kinds of things. And so in here, you can see the FY27 numbers in comparison to FY26 and the percent change. You can see the percent change over last year's costs. And that's just a graphic with the percent. And then the next one is the graphic with the dollar amount. In Article 7, we have school administration, and these are activities obviously concerned with directing and managing the operation of a particular school. Cost drivers here, we have contractual increases, insurance costs. And just as a note, the support staff that are on the chart, those are building clerical staff. And the substitutes is for office staff. So if we have someone who's going to be out sick who's in our main office, like doing reception, we do have folks that try to help cover that space for our guests to sign in, sign out, things of that nature. We don't always cover all of our office staff, but we at times will need people to cover. So there's a substitute line for them. And here, the way this breaks down, you can see the principals and assistant principals at the top. That's all contractual obligation. The support staff, those are those other front end staff for most of our schools or for our schools. That substitute line, and again, you have non-salary costs to run those offices. You see the substitute line is up a fair amount, but that's just for coverage, and we're trying to base that on actuals. Our substitute lines are over this year, or if they're not over yet, they're projected to be over. I also worry about kind of a different topic, but the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, which is coming up, I think we might see more absences than we have in the past because different criteria is applicable. And depending on the role, we need to cover that. So there'll be a cost for employee benefit, but also a cost for coverage. And this is the dollar increase chart. And the next article is Article 8, and we actually have Alyssa here she's our Director of Transportation and Nutrition, to share some information about Article 8.
So we do have some just information on what the figures are going towards. So I wanted to make sure this first slide, you kind of know where some of these cost drivers are coming from. So on the salary lines for transportation, right now we have me as the Director of Nutrition and Transportation. My role is split between those two salary lines. The dedicated employee is my assistant director, and then again, split is the administrative assistant. And I mention that because we are busing 85% of all eligible students in the district right now. So I have figured that out. So we have over 500 routes, that's AM, PM driven daily, 18 buses with monitors, 11 buses without. Those are class type C, 77 passenger buses, 2 wheelchair buses, 7 mini buses, 37 minivans, and we have 53 additional alternative rides, through 3 alternative transportation companies to make this all work. Those alternative rides, a lot of those are generated from necessity for outplaced students. So we want to go for the big buses when and at all possible. So 85% of all eligible kids. So that is, we do have a walk zone within our district. So that's looking at who we currently have on the roster. I am fully aware we have some of those students walking out of the non-walking zone into the walking zone that we occasionally pick up, but we do get them to school. We are actually transporting not just Lewiston public schools. We have 28 other schools we're transporting to. So when we say that, I have about 13 district calendars I'm holding. And that comes into play when you're looking at the budget, because while we run school 175 days, we have other sites that are running 220 to 221 days that are driving some of those fiscal costs. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware that's a lot that the 3 of us are balancing is those 28 schools. We are using, for those that haven't heard, but maybe have, we do have something called Stop Finder for GPS for parents and caretakers. And if you're on alternative transportation, we have a couple other services available, but this is not something you could go to our website and just get into. We send you a link, and that's for privacy of our students we transport. And then the districts we use for our district staff, they use something called Viewfinder. So we have 2 licenses for routing software to route the children throughout the district. And then the schools use Viewfinder so they can look up routes. And that's how we communicate how kids are getting from A to B. So with all of those moving pieces. Next slide, please. So this is where it gets not as fun, which is the cost drivers in here. So I took a deep dive into how we route our students and how that bill looks, and then made sure that I took what we're doing today for routing, make sure I understand how we're getting billed for it, and applied it for if we were to roll over to next year, what does that look like? Knowing that we have a new contract coming with Student Transportation of America with known rates in there. So when we're looking at this, we do have fuel costs. We are procuring our fuel through the city. So the buses go, the vans go, the alternative service, the fuel is included in that service. So this is really those buses that are moving field trips, things like that. The city is the one that dictates the cost at the pumps, but it is significantly lower than what you and I are paying at the pumps. So that is in there. The transportation contract itself, this does not include field trips. This is including your school to home transportation. And within that, it's divided into the categories of you have the kids that are coming to school here, and then those 28 other schools with those varying days of service. So depending on where they're going, we have some kids that run during February break in April, and during those other times. So you're looking at those costs in there with the new cost drivers. If we were to take what we do today and purely roll it over to next year. I say that because this is the full budget, but my goal is always to optimize routes and busing. So depending on our enrollment, we do adjust based on that. But when you have 77 kids fully on a bus, it's going to be a little crazy in there. So we try and limit what to about 50 is where I get happy. A little bit over that, that's where we'll have other systemic issues or timing where we literally can't pick up our schools. The other thing to think about, we are optimizing our routing as well. And I say that we don't just have one bus that only comes to this elementary school and goes back to base. Most buses are running 2 to 3 schools based on time. And I say that because of the way our district's built. If I send one bus out to the far edges of the district, that might be a close to an hour route. We don't want a kid on that long. So we're also looking at time duration on the bus route, getting to school on time. And when we had our third-party audit of our systems, they had no recommendation currently to adjust our school times to optimize that further. So we did look into if we move school times 10 minutes, 15 minutes, would that allow us to cut a route? It doesn't, unfortunately. And when I say cut a route, because we have it tiered, that would mean that the bus wouldn't go to the high school, it wouldn't go to 2 elementary schools. So I have to have it affect equally multiple areas. We also are paying attention to where kids go after school. So if we have 80 kids going to one place after school, obviously we want to make sure it's within district, within boundaries, within wards, and then we're going to schedule appropriately. Some of the technology with the new contract, we're looking at tablets on buses. This is going to give me insight on ridership. So it still means the drivers are going to have to do some checking in on the buses. But what that means for me, if I see a bus only has 10 kids on it, I'm going to be looking to collapse that route with another bus. It's about consistency though. So if a parent opts in for transportation on day one, how do we follow up with that parent to say, when do you need it or not? Because we're not quite a cab service. So with technology comes some insight, but it doesn't necessarily save you budget money going into next year. So that's what I really just want to make sure you're aware of. In the new contract, they are asking, our buses are aging based on mileage and usage from the last contract. So we are looking at a new bus fleet coming in that's built into the cost of this, of the contractor approaching us. So new buses coming in with new safety features, including the doors, anti-pinch doors, as well as making sure we call it the bat wing affectionately, but the front of the bus to make sure we have safety features as well as illuminated stop signs and lights to be in compliance with the new hearings that are taking place in Augusta on school bus safety. So we're looking in to make sure we're fully in compliance with that, if not on the cutting edge, because if we get a new bus, we need to make sure it's good for the length of the contract, if not further. And with that comes all the safety devices, whether it's making sure our younger children in the Head Start are buckled in and making sure those are ordered with the buses as well. So as we're looking at it, that's what you're looking at. The district, as far as non-salary, what we're looking at there, we do have a contract for our routing software with those 2 licenses. It's me and my assistant director that are routing all 6,028 schools, all of that. And that software, when I've gone out, I've actually checked every software company I can find in North America and worldwide, and it is the most effective for us at the moment. For what we are doing, which is good to know, but everything I looked at was more money. So with our routing software, it is effective. It will be able to go into those tablets and help our drivers, but it is also comparatively less money than what we could get if we went somewhere else. So that's included in those non-salary as well as we do have very small, but a little bit of professional development to make sure we're keeping up on all of this is included in there as well. I don't know if I had another slide. We'll find out together. I think maybe Jake made that one.
Yeah, these are just the charts
All
that
right.
represent.
So I don't know, because
Okay.
this is my first time up here, if anyone has questions on all that I just presented.
I'll start with Member Hawkins.
I just had a really quick comment when she's making comments about buses going to multiple schools. I go to 3 different schools every day. Total of, well, except for Wednesday, roughly 8 runs a day. On a Wednesday, that's 6. So these bus drivers aren't sitting on the side of the road twiddling their thumbs. It's go, go, go. Once in a while, we'll have like 5 minutes. And I tell you, if you drink too much coffee, you need that. But otherwise, we're not wasting time. We're not intentionally wasting money. And Kayla has been really great working with us, and with the back and the communication has been really good about filling in holes and correcting gaps when they occur. I know most of the drivers are very, very excited about new buses because she's not kidding when she says they're aging. Strange things happen. I have a minibus that I run for my pre-K kids. And when Tuesday morning, my Batwing was like, nope, not doing it. And I'm like, I have to leave now. And we're lucky we've got really great mechanics. They were able to switch it out quick. But when these things break down, they break down. It's not oh, we can get another one because we have no spares. So we're excited about the new contract. I've got my own issues with how that went down, but
And I
really
would
appreciate it.
would say, I'm looking at, we do the routing, that's our control as a district. So we are routing the buses. So absolutely, when I'm driving down the street and I see a bus over by Shaw's, what are they doing? Using the bathroom, quite honestly. And so part of it is when I'm talking with the drivers as we go over to Hudson and over to the bus yard is I don't want a driver driving so much that they literally can't do that human aspect of being a human. And so we have to look at that as well. But on the other end, what we call deadheading miles, that's where between schools, we have too much time, and now we tell them to sit there burning fuel. So we actually try and limit that as well. But on the other end, if it's too tight, I will get a call from an administrator that we're holding staff later because the light didn't turn or a tree branch falls. So sometimes we're a little too tight on things. They have done, even though right now I know they have no spares, in the contract it is in there that they need to have spares. So I know if I gave a call, we'll have a bus come up from New Hampshire, Connecticut, or the bottom of the state of Maine very quickly, which is nice. But the way the rules are written right now, with the new laws going into place, if her front guard isn't working, that bus needs to be out of service immediately. If the anti-pinch doors aren't working, that bus stops dead in the street. Now, we are lucky that all our schools are really close, that we can send a rescue bus. I worry about the school districts with 40 miles to cover. So those are just things we're aware of. And the driver's seat comfort, I'm absolutely concerned. If you're going to spend 6 hours in a bus, you're going to want a comfy seat to sit on. So thank you for that perspective.
I saw Member Eames and then Member Harper.
So this year we had a big I don't know what the word is. We went over a lot. Here, we're anticipating the fuel costs, but we don't know what they're going to be. Everything is crazy right now. Is there a danger that we might end up with a big overrun due to purely the fuel costs, or is the contract written in such a way that we're protected from that?
So the contract's written that we pay for the fuel. The city itself locks in the rate for gas and diesel and sends a memo out to us saying this is the rate for the next upcoming fiscal year because they buy in bulk. So unless something crazy in all the years, it stays the same for the entire year. Now, based on that, I just actually signed off on the most recent fuel bill, like for accounting. But as we look through, I can see every key fob every time they fill. And then when I'm over at Hudson, they keep a track of every time that bus fills. And then I actually go through an audit to make sure we're not driving that bus for another contract like Bates or someone else to make sure we are paying just for the fuel that we use. It does matter duration. We do ask for them to warm up the vehicles in the morning. That's going to burn some fuel. But as far as extreme overage, unless the city comes to us and says that memo is no longer valid, that would be when I would be like, okay, now we got to recalculate. The other thing to look at is as we're going through our budgeting, we do that fuel cost absolutely shows currently our field trips. So while you're not seeing it in the transportation contract, the fuel is representative of the busing fuel, the van fuel as a complete totality.
Member Harper.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, and it may be, I'm not sure if it's Alyssa or the superintendent, but first, you mentioned 28 schools, and my understanding is that there's a lot of busing that needs to happen for special education and going to special purpose private schools. I'm curious if there are other reasons why we bus kids to other school districts, and if they're, if that a burden is distributed evenly between, different districts. So that's the first question. And then the second question was just, I understand that some of the overage we saw related to taking on an expanded special education program here. And I was just curious if there's thinking that with additional efficiencies and, things realized by adopting that program and more collaboration and oversight that would, that we might see some, not the same kind of overages, but actually some decrease in transportation.
I'm very happy to start unless you want to. As far as our responsibility for busing. So technically and legally, our responsibility is special education students, especially if it's in their IEP. So we have them in two categories in that transportation contract, in district and out of district. So we have those figures that we're tracking. Those are legal, responsible part of their IEP, 504 plans, all of that. Then we have our McKinney students. And with those state laws, there is no limit to how far in the state of Maine, and I've heard of districts going outside the state of Maine as well to New Hampshire, we are to bus. So if someone says, Alyssa, go to Presque Isle right now, that's our legal responsibility. So with that, the districts are required to split that transportation cost. And so what I've been doing is, again, a deep dive in how much administration, fuel, busing, everything are we putting in, making sure we're billing out equally for our share of that busing to that other district. But if we have a child and they take the AM route and we take the PM route, it is considered split. So we spend a lot of our day, what transport are they on? What vehicle are they on? Who's doing what? And it changes daily. And I would say during the day as well. So we've had days where we've done double or whatever, because our obligation is still to get that child to school. The other part that we come into is we have some of our special education students that their programming doesn't exist at their current location or ward. And so then we bus them or van them to the district or ward that is going to take that student. And so that can incur a cost of a van because we're not going to send a full bus into that district. If it's close, we can. So example is the Montello Connors, the street that is bordering it. One side is Montello and one side is Connors. That's usually pretty good. But if you're taking a child from one end and going to the other. So all of that, when we come to those in-district transfers, runs through the superintendent's office with Karen and Jake approving those. So it is not a decision that my team makes. We'll look at it and say, ooh, you don't fit the criteria. And so then we say, what are we doing with this student? So they can look at the legal or other fiscal parts of it. So on that part, yes, it's divvied up into many different categories. Now, the potential savings is absolutely to look at, are there other reasonable activities we can do with working with special education for certain children to offer them a mainstream bus, but provide them a different sort of accommodation that isn't an individual ride? And so that takes individual meetings with our special education department, with the team, with the families, with the students, and to look at what's really going on. So that process is already happening now. And it's not a fast process because we want to do what's right for those students, because some of them absolutely need, based on their medical disability, certain rides. So with all of that being said, it's a moving piece daily. And yes, we have tons and tons of kids that we go through and very much are looking at. So as we move into the new contract, I obviously look at, if that's my higher cost item, is there an availability to move it to a lower cost driving route? But then to complicate things more, we do bill out for transportation services through Maine Care and otherwise, but those revenue streams come in and hit our special education budget line. So you're not going to see that recognized in my mind's expenses. So there is some money coming in depending on the child, depending on what their status is and all of that. So those billing things happen as well. I don't know if you have more, Jake?
I just think that, well, a couple of questions that were asked. One is the fuel piece is not a guarantee. It's not as volatile as the pumps that we see as modern consumers, but or community consumers. But I do believe there are provisions for exigent circumstances. I don't know what they are, but I can dig. I would also say those cost overruns are very much special education and additional routes and accommodating students who qualify as McKinney-Vento. Those are the bigger cost drivers. What Alyssa's been working on with special ed is, instead of one kid on a van or one run with that van in the morning, can it do two runs with two kids? So it's two vans instead of six, or is it a minibus versus four vans? What synchronicity can we find to reduce the amount of, especially the privatized hired out rides? Because it all costs additional funds.
And we pay per vehicle would be the other thing. So when we look at our billing, I'm paying for that bus to run. And what I've calculated, and this is, you already know this because you drive, but there's some bus drivers that between all their schools, that's 200 kids a day that they're transporting. So when you do that times the fleet, but we're always looking, we have a 4-hour contract with that vehicle right now. So I've already recognized we have a couple overages. So the next year's contract, it's a 6-hour contract. So that means gifted and talented is not a budget line anymore because I can fit that on a vehicle in the 6 hours. That means 21st century, I might be able to absorb differently, and Head Start as well. And it's really based on the vehicle running. Now, I still might have 2 drivers running it because they can't drive for 6 hours, but the vehicle itself is what we are paying for. So that's where we're using that leverage of the contract to get us the time and hopefully cut some of those budget lines as well.
Counselor Harriman.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on 2 things. So on the city fuel contract, if I'm not mistaken, the city finance director told us recently that they usually go out in March for bids for that. They've held off this month because of the volatility, so they're waiting until next month to see how things happen there. And that's obviously where the schools get our fuel from. And then also on the transportation contract, I know this is kind of for people watching. It's I think about a 45% increase, which seems very large, but we couldn't do any better, honestly, with the bids that we got. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. And it does sound like we're getting a little bit, maybe more service in this contract. So that helps soften the blow a little bit, but it's still a large increase, unfortunately.
If I could just tag on to that a bit, because this is showing the increase over the budgeted amount for this fiscal year. But my understanding is there's been a pretty big overage in this fiscal year. So this is maybe for you, maybe for the superintendent, but what would that percentage increase look like comparing to the projected actual amount for this year, and comparing that to next year?
I mean, I can ballpark it, but we looked at numbers that were a million plus over potentially this year. There's also been some reconciliation of some billing that Alyssa has done a good job with, so that will help reduce that burden. But to your point, I don't have the number in front of me, but when we look at the projected overage, the new contract, it is not that massive jump that it looks like if we go right to the actuals.
And again, that overage is from unanticipated McKinney-Vento and special education.
That's correct,
Right.
yes.
Member Hawkins, and then back to Member Ames.
I'll be really quick. The other thing I wanted to say and didn't is one of the great things that I saw happen with transportation this year was we had several buses that were very, very full. And it was mostly because of children going to a central location for after-school care. And I love what that program is doing, but we had several buses that were at capacity and pushing it. And the great thing that Alyssa and STA got together and did was create a whole separate bus to do just that busing. It took so much pressure off of the drivers. I drove for Montello a couple years ago, and that was honestly the hardest stretch of my day, was that few minutes taking them from the school to the location, because my bus was at capacity, full of, in some cases, very, very young children. When children get out of school, it's kind of like open the floodgates. If teachers are in the room, they know. Parents, when you pick them up at school, you see it. Pack them into a bus together. It is not always pleasant. And the great thing about splitting it up onto a separate bus is those groups are much smaller. It's much easier to maintain some level of decorum while we get them to their destination. It's made it a lot easier for us as drivers to function and for our buses to function safely. So that was a huge help. And I know it was a little bit of legwork for you guys.
But it wasn't a huge financial driver either, because in the current contract, it has that when we work outside the contract, that the terminal manager and myself will negotiate the price. And based on that bus only doing a short run, we were able to do it for, instead of $500 a day, less than, around $100 and something a day. And so when you look at that, to maintain our driver base, make sure the bus isn't overloaded, to safety concerns where our community partners are chasing kids down streets, that is helpful. But when we're doing that, it is a very strategic move to make sure that we're meeting the needs. So when that We consider that another calendar we keep. When that calendar is up for the day, we know where all those other kids are going to go to hit all the other buses to make sure it's reserved. It's kind of like comparing it to air travel, but we reserve seats on buses is pretty much what we're doing. So if you have moms on this day for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and dad here and here, but some days you might go here and here, we have to make sure you have a space on both buses for that. And so it absolutely matters when people tell us if they're utilizing the bus. And at the high school right now, we do have an opt-in. It works sort of well, but that way we're not sending 21 buses in the morning and you see 5 kids on there. So we're trying to, even though I can't save financially on that, but could that bus then go do a special needs run? Could they go do somewhere else? So those are all the things. And based on our routing software we have, it's literally a resource schedule where I can see the route goes from here to here. It's connected to their GPS. So I can actually see the real run that she's doing, compare it to what I routed, and then change the route based on what she's really doing on street patterns, or suggest, hey, I need you to only take rights in the city because of the light pattern. I mean, that's how detailed we are. I even have the speed limits and literally map out the roads here in that software. So all of those things give us a little more ability once they're all in there to make those decisions, working with the teams in the district to say, I do have a spot here. I have 20 minutes here. Do I have a driver to do that? Same vehicle, same price. So those are the things we're doing right now in optimization.
Member Reeves? No? Okay. Okay, Member Harper.
I'm curious around the busing for McKinney-Vento students, just because I don't know what if it's a state law about, I mean, folks. Okay, here's what here's what I want to say. We are a service center community, so I would imagine we end up with more sort of young folks who are housing insecure, because they would come here to get other resources. So I don't know, compared to other districts, what that looks like, but it seems like there should be some figuring in state budgets for how service center communities can kind of figure out how to pay for transportation all over the rest of the state.
So we do get some funding from McKinney-Vento. In my 20 years in Lewiston, it has never reached anywhere near what it costs to bus McKinney-Vento kids. We are a service center. I had a scenario today and to be quick, we have a student who has decided to live with friends in Lewiston, but is from the J. Livermore area. Can enroll here, but could also, because he's chosen to live with friends in Lewiston, arrange for McKinney-Vento transportation potentially to go to J to school every day, while the parents are able to have him at home. And so there's different qualifiers that I might not philosophically agree with, but there are also a lot of complex situations that the continuity to remain kids at the school where they are best to be. I didn't say that well, but I think you get the gist. But to maintain their access to school where they feel they should be is a priority that is definitely not funded anywhere near adequately.
And I would just say the status, once they're identified and we do have a process we go through of vetting out and going through everything, and they can definitely speak more to that. But once they're in that status, it's valid for the year. And so that means even if something else happens until they finally say to me, I'm not using your ride, we are using that ride. So it gets our most vulnerable students that education they need. So that's a lot of the times where I'm like, did I get that kid to school that otherwise would be not even going? So those are definitely things. But yes, there's a financial cost. We do look that, can we pair the whole family into the vehicle and they all go together to elementary, middle, and high school? Absolutely. And can we have one family that we're like, can we partner with this other city to help them out? And equally, we're spitting costs on that as well. So those are the billing parts of looking at it as truly doing that. But it is a day-to-day, moment-to-moment. I probably have 10 emails sitting right there with changes for tomorrow. So we're just always picking up on that.
Just have two last questions. So the 53 additional alternative rides you mentioned, is that also done under the STA contract, or are those separate contracts?
If I had my way, everything would be 100% through our main contractor because obviously that is our best price with the volume that we have. With driver shortages nationally over the last few years, we have rides to places like Jake said that we simply do not have a vehicle ride or the ability to transport, and the other district doesn't as well. And because we're legally obligated, that opens us up for potential litigation. And so because of that, we were looking for what can we do to provide this service. So we started with one alternative. That wasn't enough. They didn't have capacity. So we have currently 3, but out of my goal is to get everyone back to the cheapest, most reliable, get you from A to B transport. That is absolutely the goal. So those ones are on my list, but I'm very appreciative in the meantime that we have those services available because 3 years ago, I didn't. I had nothing, and I had to tell the departments, like, this is our legal obligation. I'm like, we're going to be opening ourselves up to some major issues. So I'm very happy, and then that we have that available. Other school districts are equally, I just had an email, so other school districts are equally joining in, so that split billing is easier. But for me, that is not my first course. We actually have an email and a list of what is our plan when someone comes in for first, second, third tier down the line. And even then, sometimes that's not enough. I have many administrators behind me that absolutely are hopping in our white vans to help out when possible as well.
Okay, so just they're the 3 that you mentioned, they're like local cab companies or something.
No, so no different than our busing. They have to have legal, if they got in an accident. We need to make sure that they have the insurance to cover our students. They need background checks. We need to make sure they have safety protocols. We won't just put them in a cab because we're busing and some of them are 6 years old or younger. I can't put a 4-year-old in a cab. I won't. And so because of that, we vet out these companies. The drivers are vetted out. The insurance is in place for all of those. Plus we have GPS tracking on them. Some have cameras on them. So all of this, it can't just be, now the car might show up and you're like, hey, that looks like a Toyota or a Honda or something. Absolutely. But even that has gone through inspections as well. So right now we're using 2 nationally recognized companies. And then we have one local one as well that we're able to utilize. But all of them have to go through it. And enough so that probably my next stop is at the state of Maine to request alternative transportation guidelines for other districts so that they don't have drivers that aren't vetted out. But that's how passionate I am about making sure we just don't put them wherever. But my first is always going to be our main contract because that is our best deal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll direct this to Jake, but you can chime in if you like. So I feel like I have to ask, is there any place you see any opportunity to reduce this line item in the budget? I understand it seems very prescribed by legal issues in the contract, and there's not much that's under our direct control, but it is such a huge increase. Do you see any opportunity here? Is this pretty much fixed?
So the only opportunity I see is to find a way to collapse rides. And it's that example I shared earlier with, how many kids on a van needing what level of service, and could we use a larger vehicle, staff it? I don't know, but Alyssa's been working on that. We've also got some scenarios where students have displayed certain behaviors at school that have led down a path where they need specialized transportation, but yet they're able to get on a bus to go on a field trip and they're fine. And so we're analyzing those case by case to say, no, this is not necessary. And then talking about appropriate behavior or losing the privilege. And so there's a layer there that I think that might lead to some cost savings, but things of large magnitude I don't envision. The other thing that came up was the in-district, like the enrollment question around kids going to schools that might not be in their district. Well, that happens for lots of reasons. People have daycare, people have family situations. My kids go to my parents after work or grandparents or things of that nature. So there's lots of shuffling of where kids land at the end of the day that we get lots of requests for, as far as my kid needs to go to, Montello, for example, because daycare is right down the street. And that's a request that parents put in, especially with the littles. We try to maintain that continuity where we can.
Thank you.
I would also
Yes.
just, when I'm looking at savings, ridership matters. And when I say ridership, who's actually utilizing the bus? And so that takes a whole team approach, and it's never going to be perfect because as a parent myself, I signed up for a bus in another town and I probably used it twice. And so how do we mark that and allow those parents to still use the bus as they need to, as they need for that area of the city, but also pay attention. So having more attendance, and we definitely care about that. And that's going to be a learning curve because right now we're not having kids sign in, but that's the technology we're heading towards. That's a learning curve. How do you teach a young kid to find their name or their stop? How do you teach the drivers or the aides, all of that? So I don't think it's just going to come out in August that I'm going to have this magical solution, but that is honestly the technology and the solution to head towards to then say, now I can actually say who's riding the bus and when, and then maybe I can cut it back on certain days, times. The other thing, we get creative when we're looking at, do we bus the kids twice a day for the high school shutting down during midterms at noon? We've made a decision last year, we're not doing that. So we are looking for those types of things, those repeated kind of moments of, okay, maybe we can cut off the fleet that day, or we can do that day, or utilize the fleet differently. So the more digital data I have, actually, the easier it is for me to resource allocate. And the terminal manager has been absolutely wonderful as far as sitting down with me and looking at those details and bringing back the real life scenario. Well, Alyssa, this is why we do it, because literally we can't do this. Thank you. Some of that too, we literally are pulling digital footage, hard drives from the bus. So if there's an incident on the bus, they have to go back to the depot to pull that. If a kid forgets their tuba, we have to go back to the school, like all these different scenarios. So we're trying to limit and work with everyone, but those things are going to happen. So it's looking at, does it fit in that 6 hours, all those good things.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Alyssa. So we transition now to Article 10. And Alyssa was the last one who wasn't available to present that component. So again, thank you. Article 10 is debt service. Is a pretty straightforward piece. There's a reduction in our project debt. And Adam explained this, I think, one of our prior meetings, but essentially we have less debt on the books, but we also, some projects have state revenue tied to it. So it comes into us and then goes back out. And so this is that qualifier or that budget area where debt service comes out of. In Article 11, sorry, this is the graphics of that. I'll talk to Article 11 in just a second. You see just the reduction. All right, so in Article 11, a while back, we had talked about putting in a placeholder because of nutrition-related costs and cost overruns. Alyssa's done some work and we've really examined that and feel like between the levels of the state and federal funding and the reimbursement program that we will be able to pull that out of this budget. She's committed to find ways to work lean and not have that. So I'll mention this in another slide coming up, but that's something that we believe we can reduce, which is not in your current set of reductions. We also have there build crossing guards. There's some kind of strange statute out there that schools cannot employ crossing guards. They need a certain kind of training, and they, I believe, are employees of the city, and then we get invoiced for them. The rate has been very reasonable, has not changed much over time.
Member Glenn?
Oh, yes, are we going to have a presentation from nutrition?
So nutrition doesn't have an article because it's fully funded from federal areas. If we did have to budget additional funds, we could. Alyssa is here. She's the director of that, but we
Right.
don't typically do a presentation on nutrition.
Oh, I thought I saw one at one point. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, we have had one before, but not as part of the budget process since they're not in the local budget in the same way. Member Hawkins?
I just wanted to say really quickly on the crossing guards from a bus driver standpoint, I want to give them all boxes of chocolate because the things I see driving my bus, even with crossing guards there, it's not always the safest situation. And their vest might be fluorescent yellow, but that doesn't mean people see them. And it's been, especially I pick up at Farwell, and that little old man does an amazing job. And he has no issue getting out there and waving that sign when people are not paying attention. And he's very friendly and very great with the kids. And I'm thankful for him every day. I know the other schools, we have them as well, some of them. And I've never heard a bus driver say they hate the crossing guard. I think we would all hug them if we could, and it wasn't weird. But I'm very glad to see that we are aware of them and that we do know how to make sure they're getting what they deserve. I would give them more myself, but I can't.
All right, so in this article, so this chart will all be changed with that recommended reduction, which I'm assuming the committee, without a negative impact upon kids, will be more than willing to adopt, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So these reflect the changes in what we thought we would need for reserve and nutrition, which we are walking back from. So the next section we wanted to share, I wasn't sure how to frame this, but there have been a lot of inquiries. There have been some updates. So I just decided to title these next series of slides Inquiries and Updates. And so you should know that there has been traction with the Ed Committee and that it looks like it will reach the floor to increase the economically disadvantaged adjustment from 0.15 to 0.35 was the latest number I got. That is a significant shift for us. That would not take effect for another year out if adopted. I do think it has good traction. That said, there's an effort to push a one-time funding effort to bridge between the current fiscal year and what will then be FY28 if that's adopted, that first bullet. And that effort, which I don't know if there's funding, I don't know if it'll get appropriated. We'll see what kind of energy it has behind it, but is to issue a one-time $400 per economically disadvantaged student. And that would be, if approved, active for the next fiscal year. So it would be in this budget that we're talking about. Again, that's if approved. If that does happen, it was $1.59 million for Lewiston alone. But it's a big ask, and we'll see if it gets traction. So I would encourage anyone who's trying to support education to reach out to their representatives to try to push that narrative around this one time. They're calling it a bridge effort between the LD 2226 and the gap that we have right now. Also, as inquiries and updates, we've had a lot of questions about the proposed reductions in the librarian and the related area. And so people were asking questions around clarity of, well, what would that cost? And so I just thought we'd put it to a slide to explain it. Again, I don't think anyone is in favor of any of the cuts. No member of this committee has said, cut this, cut that. Every member of this committee has said we get to preserve all that we can. So these are tough choices. This proposal is consistent with our current elementary model that has a pre-K to 6 librarian who has ed techs in the libraries. So this isn't a revolutionary thought, but it does reduce our capacity and expertise. If we leave it as is, Adam helped me pull these numbers together, as listed, a librarian at the middle school, a librarian at the high school, and that ed tech exists already. So there's already that second position there. That estimated cost is $249,122. And with a restructure, which would cause a shift, I did look into, as I had said prior, that I would explore a pre-K to 12 librarian. We just feel way too big for that. And I did talk to some other districts that run on a similar model, and that theme kept coming back to me that we're just probably too big for that. So in this restructure, I did narrow that from we're exploring to, I think, if you wanted to make this change, a 712 librarian, so you'd have that person that does just oversee middle and high school. You would need to add a middle school ed tech. And then the LHS ed tech is existing, so that would remain, but again, a reduction of a human capacity, because right now there's 2. If you took that route, the cost of that would be $167,768. It just gives you a comparison. It doesn't speak to the loss of capacity and expertise, but it gives you at least numbers to look at. We also found another error, so you'll be happy about this one, that our JROTC positions, we have 2 that operate out of the high school, and their budget allocation is different than teachers because they're actually employees of the federal government. And so we pay their contract, but they, they're like G10s or I forget the right scale. I'm sorry if I upset anyone, but they have different levels in the military that these folks, depending on their rank, that's where they land. When we moved their funds, one was to be reduced because we had someone retire, and then we hired new. So in that process of reducing the person that retired and looking to add specifically the one that got hired because their levels are different, it actually slid over. So it looks like we have 3 people in that section. So that's a correction that we found going through line by line. And so that's a reduction of 72,661.
Which article?
And that will live in Article 7. Oh, high school administration or administering of school. Yep. Some other updates. We went through our facilities efforts, and there are projects that are slated to be done that I think we can defer for future work. I don't want to defer, but I think we can. One example is we have recommendations to shift doorknobs in some of our schools because they're antiquated, and it's the paddle style that's being recommended, especially in some of our high needs classroom spaces, because kids don't necessarily have the ability to grab and turn. And so that's just one example of something that was scheduled to be done. Does it have to be done? I think eventually. Do we need a plan for it to be done? I think we do. But that and some other repairs that I think it improves our spaces, but I think we can hold off. In that case, that reduction, trying to find other ways to do that work or defer it would be $111,000 potentially.
Member Bowden?
Sorry, are we gonna get sued if we don't do that? I don't
don't
wanna
think
put
so.
ourselves in like legal jeopardy here over something that's ADA required.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't know that it's an ADA requirement as much as a recommendation when you're renovating spaces. And so, and do you have a plan? And I think the question of having a plan of, we've done the assessment, we have that information back to us, we know what that tier of work is, and when we can fund it appropriately, we would work to do that. And then you might also see other things where if we have, for example, an LCIP project and we spend 90% of it, we might come back to you to repurpose that other 10% to do these kinds of things if that happens. So we got it on a list. We don't want to violate the law, put ourselves in jeopardy. And we certainly don't want our kids to have and adults to have any kind of dysfunction. These are functional situations that are recommendations for improvement. And then the next one is Article 11, which we just mentioned about nutrition. And that third bullet there is if those 2 adjustments, those are not in your binder, but between those and that other position that we identified, you're starting to get close to the $300,000 that we've been able to find that we believe we can pull back from.
I'm still locked into the nutrition program. So how the effect of $100,000, how is that going to affect the nutrition program? Are they going to get less breakfast, less food, lunches, less snacks? How is that going to look like?
So when we moved to a different model where all schools could feed kids if they qualified and that no kid would go without lunch, I don't know if that was 2 years ago, roughly. We were already living in that model. And so when we saw salary increases and just different contractual things in district, we were worried about cost overruns. And last year we had budgeted, I think, $5,000 for that cost overrun. And then as projections, remember we start this in December, as projections were out there about what could we see in shrinking funding, one of the things that we were worried about was nutrition funding. So in the current model, with reimbursement that are connected to state, federal, and all kinds of grants that Alyssa finds, that reduction will not change what we offer kids. So it won't improve what we offer kids as much as Alyssa would like, but it doesn't have a negative impact on what we can provide for the meals and the snacks. I think the elephant in the room right now in Lewiston is everyone's asking about taxes. These are just a couple of pieces of what we know, but I also don't want to get ahead of city and the work that they're doing. And my understanding is they're working diligently. But information we have been given is that $39,500 equals 1 cent. And the reason I bring that to you today is as we start to embark on the what adjustments might you want to make in the school committee's version of the budget, every time you reduce or add $39,500, you're reducing or adding a cent to the mill rate. And so sometimes we do quick calculations to figure out how much something might impact that rate. So that's the number we'll be working off of. The projected mill rate breakdown is $19.68. The school portion of that is slated to be $8.05 as things stand now. The city version, the city proposed, projected number is $10.42, and the county, which has gone up significantly, is at $1.21. But valuations have not been released, and so there's the what we know components of this slide, but what we do not know is how much someone's property value has changed. A lot, some, or reduced. And what we're hearing is there's going to be more of the a lot for residential property owners. And that information will be available, is it like the third week of April or towards the end of April, Councilor?
That's what I've been told, yes.
So usually around this time, I just want to say this openly to the public, when there isn't a revaluation, we can tell you exactly how much your mill rate impact will be. And as a homeowner, you could go look at your current valuation on the city site, or if you have that at home, and you would be able to say, okay, this adjustment means my taxes will change by this much. And right now, we're still working through that process, and the city will get us that information as soon as it's available, is my understanding. So good. Sorry.
Yeah, member Eames.
When you say the mill breakdown is projected this, school is 8.05, which number are they working on? Our original number or the current? That must be the original number that you floated, right?
So the number that we provide the city as early as we can is the superintendent's version of the budget. So yes, that's what the 805 would be. So any reductions you all make or these savings we just found would actually reduce that 805. And if anything you put back that came out of that, when I said we came in at 6.5 million, but I reduced things, if you want to put those things back, it would go above 805.
Member Harper, and then member Wood.
I want to say that I look forward to just connecting with the city assessor's office and the city administrator. Personally with this, I haven't asked these exact questions, but I know there's been a lot of other people who have been trying to ask different questions related to the revaluation. I find it kind of impossible to set a school budget without also understanding what different scenarios would be like for, just looking at all the properties in the city of Lewiston, what is the average, homeowner, or like, how many people do we have that purchased their homes prior to the last reval in 1988? And, where's that median, and what is there, if everything remained constant, what would the increase be for those folks? Because yeah, like you said, at this point, you really would have, for the public, be able to say, and for our perspective, be able to be responsible about what we're putting in a budget. And also, I have questions about, people's ability to, in terms of when these tax bills are going to be due for folks. Like, if it's in the fall, people need time to financially plan for, a potential large increase. And so, yeah, I just have a lot of questions, and just as like a a school committee member, but also as just a resident of Lewiston. I'm not sure that it is responsible to hit people with that big of an increase, because it's nobody's fault that this revaluation hasn't happened in however long since. No, it's not our fault. It's not the city. It's not the taxpayers' fault that it hasn't happened. So, yeah, I have a lot of questions about that, and it feels really challenging to do this budgeting process without more information. So, I think that's what I wanted to say.
Member Glant?
Yes, so in the end of April, we should be able to have those re-evaluations, and we're going to be voting on a school budget a week or two later. That's pretty a difficult position to be in. With that being said, I think we're going to have to make the cuts. I don't think once those bills come in, we're going to look at those bills and say, oh, this is ridiculous. How are we going to pay for this? So I think we're in for a lot of cuts that will be acceptable to the taxpayer.
Counselor Harriman?
Yes, I just wanted to add generally about the revaluation, just every chance I get, that when the revaluation happens, it doesn't increase the amount of taxes, the amount of revenue that the city or the school receives. So even if your bill goes up, it doesn't mean that we're getting more money to increase services or anything. Someone else's bill has gone down by that same amount. So it's a little hard to wrap your mind around that. Like, why am I paying so much more and I'm getting the same? But it's just because we haven't done in 40 years, we haven't readjusted those tax bills to spread it out evenly.
Member Bowden and then Member Eames.
So this is actually something I was talking to Jake about today. I don't really think it matters what the amount is. The school budget is going to be the vessel that the taxpayers in the city use to take their anger out on, because it's the only thing that they have to vote on. So I agree with Member Gallant. We're going to have to make cuts.
Member Eames.
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. I don't understand how they can say it's revenue neutral and yet they're cutting everywhere. That doesn't make any sense to me. They have a reevaluation of the taxes. They're bringing the mill rate down. They're bringing the valuations up. They say it's revenue neutral and yet we have to cut. It should be that we don't have to cut because it's revenue neutral. But that's not what's happening. Maybe Scott, you can speak to that if I'm allowed to ask him.
Go ahead.
Well, just because the budget goes up every year, like the school budget, goes up by a certain number of a few percentage points every year, the city budget does the same. So the revenue that you're bringing in, it's the same every year. So even if we cut the budget down to a smaller increase, that's still higher than the revenue that's coming in. I guess I probably didn't do a good job explaining that, but yeah,
There's multiple things happening at the same time, is maybe the way to think about it. The revaluation could happen it's on its own, floating out there, just rebalancing, the property values to the market. We still have our regular budget process where our costs are going up in different ways. And so even if there was no revaluation, I think we would be having a similar conversation about, needing to find reduction somewhere because certain costs have gone up so much. Does that make some sense?
Well, what I was trying to get at is that it's not really revenue neutral. It seems like if there's tax increases, then it can't be. So I am just trying to fathom that. It's just mysterious to me.
Right. The overall process right now is not revenue neutral. It's just strictly the revaluation on its own would be, although not revenue neutral just among homeowners or something. It's like for all property taxpayers in the city. So what's probably, again, I'm having to kind of speculate here, but it's pretty likely it's going to be shifting a balance from commercial to residential because that balance was very different 40 years ago in terms of how valuable a commercial property was. But anyways, I guess I do want to say that since we're on this topic and we're not the city council. I do think though it's been, well, no school committee or city council has had to do a budget process in the midst of a revaluation in 40 years at least, and I'm not sure how they did it back then. I will say not having such basic information, such as what is the average residential valuation going to be, or what are some sample valuations of residential properties, single family home, multifamily in different circumstances, and so on. Not knowing what the real property value change has been year to year in terms of actual growth, new buildings and things like that. We don't know what the revenue side impact of our budget process is going to be. And I think I've kind of alluded to this a little bit at most meetings. It'd be nice to know what the mill rate is and so on. And at least we do have that now. I'm kind of getting at the point though, where it doesn't feel responsible to carry out for us to vote on a budget, the city council to vote on the budget, and then the city to have to vote on a budget when there's this unknown hanging out there in terms of how much the impact is going to be on property owners exactly. Again, our job isn't to manage the revaluation process. Our job is just to come up with a responsible school budget, and we'll do that and have to do that. One thing I'm thinking about, and maybe we can come back to this as at the next meeting or the meeting after, depending on what information we've received. But I think we could consider sending some communication to the council of considering, at least I'll say for myself, and we can see later on if other members agree, but I don't feel like this is a responsible approach to a budget to have to make these decisions without that information. And the city has had 40 years to do a revaluation, has been working on it for, I don't know, 3 years. And the information is going to hit the property owners a couple weeks. Well, one, after we voted on the budget, and then just before the public has to vote on the budget, and just a few months before they have to start paying based on those new valuations. And it's just a time frame that's no longer making sense to me. So again, I don't want that to be our whole conversation because some of it's a little bit out of our purview, but I think we might consider at least a strongly worded letter or something to the council about that. But yeah, Member Glenn, I saw your hand.
Yeah, given the information that we have, and May 12th is the day that we're supposed to vote. Is there any leeway in that date? Because if we get the reevaluations at the end of April, we could use a little bit more time to vote on a budget. I mean, is it a statute that says you must vote, the third Tuesday on the school budget or in May or something?
My understanding is it's dictated by charter. The timing of these things are dictated by charter. I can reach out to the city clerk to ask those questions. I do know that we've had to do revotes. So
Right, if they strike it down, like, was it last year or the year before, was 2 times, we had to come back to the drawing. So we might have to do that again anyway. So, I don't know.
I do know there's cost to these referendums and the school department pays for them. So
I
the
had
more
no
we-
idea.
The more that we do, the more we
Okay,
pay for it.
well, we'll do it right the first time maybe, huh?
Member Harper.
Thank you. I know that this is my first go around in this budgeting process. And I know that the process has kind of always been, the school committee puts forward what they think is a responsible budget. And then the city does their own process and they're sort of distinct. But I am really hoping, particularly in this very unique situation with the reval that there can be a new, way of looking at things in terms of, I mean, the reality is that if the timing of this works out the way that it normally does, or that we're hearing that it is, just like Member Bowden said, people will be going to the ballot box and basically like taking out our students, our youth, our future will be like bearing the burden of this whole revaluation and yeah, so there's a lot of different questions. I don't know that if this is the place to have them, but I guess it's a public forum, so it should be, basically, like, I know that we're out of compliance with state law, and that's why we're doing the reevaluation, but it seems like we've been out of compliance for a while. It seems like there should be more leeway. Again, people can't, in a low-income community, you cannot slam people with multiple thousands of dollars. This is also going to impact renters. Their rents are going to go up if they all of a sudden, if their owner of that building gets like multiple $1,000 increase on their tax bill. So, that just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense for the future of our students and our schools. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of really important questions that need to be answered in terms of like, how do we like just treat people with fairness and our students with fairness in our future?
Yeah, Member Eames.
I would ask Member Harriman to bring back to the city committee, city council, a proposal to delay, drag out, maybe even totally postpone the current revaluation, or do it in bits. So it's not a sudden hit for anybody. And also, then it doesn't hit just before our referendum. That's my selfish side of it.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to add that, so the latest from the assessing department is that the contractor, so Tyler Technologies, is doing the revaluation. They don't have the final numbers yet. Everyone's supposed to get a letter next month with their new valuation. Some of us on the council have asked, are there ways that this can be phased in, or can it take effect over maybe 3 years or something like that? Because some people, like I did just rough calculations on my own home, and it's looking like a several $1,000 increase in annual taxes for me. And like others said, that's going to hit renters as well, because my building, for example, is a 3-unit building that I live in. If that were just 3 units, 3 rental units, those costs would have to go up as well. So we have asked about phasing it in, if there's some way to soften that, and haven't really heard solid answers on that yet, but it sounds like they're thinking about it and thinking if there are ways to do that.
Yes, Member Eames.
Is there a place for us as a body to weigh in on that? Like, could we write a strongly worded letter?
I mean, oh, were you going to add something?
I was gonna say, I think the committee could essentially direct me to go find out what are the options with, if any, with this. I think it's gonna take some digging. I don't think it'll take too long, but it might be something I can bring back Monday as far as what would be the mechanism if you wanted to take such a step to move a referendum. I think it's worth the research before a letter, because I do think it's either charter and or statute, and there's provisions.
But just to be clear, I think there might be 2 things. One, you're referring to the date of the vote on
Yes.
the school budget. So that might be one piece to look into. I think that would be appreciated. But then the second piece, in terms of encouraging a phased in approach or something with the revaluation, I think, I mean, I guess this, in part, that is the purpose of having the city council representative here. But if it would add more weight, or there's some, disagreement maybe amongst the council, if it would be valuable, we could maybe on Monday. Or actually, this first question, I suppose, when is the next opportunity for the city council to actually discuss this? Would the following meeting on next week or the week after that? I'm just thinking about, again, we have to vote on a budget in the next week or two. Right. So we don't have that much time ourselves to. Member Eames, you want to add something?
We have to vote on it in time for the agenda of the city council to have it in place. So what is that, 4 days ahead of the meeting? So if they're meeting on the 7th, then 4 days before that?
Right. So in that case, we should be voting on a proposal next week. I guess I might suggest then that, yeah, we do I mean, it would be simple enough. And if members are generally amenable to it, to just have a simple letter together. We can review it by our next meeting next Monday to send along with our budget proposal. Are people okay with that idea? Okay. Okay. This is tough. I mean, it's not entirely within our control, and yet it so much defines our budget process. With that said, I know we do need to discuss, I think, what budget we do want to be sending forward. And I know the superintendent did have another slide or two, but are there any other comments on that subject of the reevaluation? Member Bowden?
I was just gonna say, like, our discussion as far as like what we're cutting and what we want to bring forward, I think should wait until Monday when the full committee is here.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think we'll move forward with any votes or anything tonight, certainly, but I think at least getting information and ideas out tonight would be ideal. But was there more you were going to present?
Yes, I just have one more slide, but it was essentially to say that that was it from me for now, but looking for your input. And so, 1 second. So again, the next phase of this process is really to start discussing further any information that you would like to have us research. Typically, in the past, we've discussed the constructs of options based on the direction of the director of the school committee. So taking questions from you, essentially things we can go research, thoughts you have about the current proposed reductions. And what we would really like to do is gather your thoughts and at least have an opportunity to bring it to our management team, our principals and directors, to try to conceptualize the things that you're looking for a target, to bring up options back to you, and move forward from there. So if you have thoughts and or questions or thoughts on options or a target number or area, we'll take it and do the best we can with it and bring it back to you.
I'll start with Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I think I mentioned this at a previous workshop, but I would still like to see what the numbers look like if we were to keep all of the positions on the proposed cut list that are currently occupied, and then and then just kind of, I don't know if you can break it out by position and how much that would affect the bottom line, but I'd prefer to see all the positions that are currently occupied kept whole, and then consider the other ones on that list that were vacant, sort of case by case, and see if that makes sense to cut them.
Member Glant?
I would like to see the proposed cuts by the superintendent along with the information that we got tonight as far as the found money or the errors that were found. I think that's important too.
Member Bowden?
Okay, so I obviously want to see the proposals that you gave us tonight, those numbers worked in. But I would also like to see what it looks like if we only add back one social emotional learning position instead of 5. And I would like to see what it looks like if we leave the Dean of Students at Montello.
Just for my own sake, do you mind clarifying? Because I know we've kind of talked around this a few times previously. When you say adding back 1 instead of 5.
So the social emotional learning coaches in his proposal are all being removed, but then he's creating 5 new social emotional learning positions for the element. I'm curious what it would look like budget-wise if we just had one of those social emotional learning professionals and the dean of students staying at Montello, because I think that position is actually very important at Montello.
I can definitely get that to a graphic so you can see it, but I think it would be essentially the same or very similar to that the cost of each of those positions will be roughly the same, not just for frame of reference, but I can get you some numbers.
Back to member Glant.
Yes, if you could give us, like you have in years past, three or four scenarios of what everyone has asked, I think that would be good. So we can actually look at 3 or 4.
Yeah, agreed. Member Eames. Could you use your microphone?
Sorry. Totally agree with everything people have said in terms of needing scenarios, needing this in, this out, that in, that out, the different options. In terms of priorities, to me, the librarian's very important. I can't imagine running the system of this size without the librarian. But I'd like to know, the ins and outs of that. I think the social support staff is essential, and I can't imagine losing all of them or having only one. When we do that, though, we have to think about the difference between equity and equality. So for there to be equity, it seems to me we have to consider the buildings that these students are in and the needs of the particular demographic makeups of the various schools. So I don't think one here, one here, one here, one here, one here makes sense. I know that in this political time, everything being the same is the way people think it should go, but I resist that. I think that equal inputs are not the way to go. It's equal outcomes that we want to have, and that means differently resourced spaces. The old, image of the fence with the baseball game on one side and the father, mother, and child on the other side of the fence. And the father can see over the fence, but the mother needs one crate to stand on to see over the fence, and the child needs 2 crates to see over the fence, stands for me. So Montello is a school that has very inflexible buildings and needy population, it's overcrowded, et cetera, can't be flexible. So I think Montello should be the focus of our efforts. Every school needs at least one, but Montello might need more than one, like this extra dean. All right. And then I myself, as an educator, feel very strongly that the coaches are needed. The pedagogical lessons that they can provide are essential, but I am aware that I may be in a minority here. So I acknowledge that, but I want to at least speak on to the importance of pedagogical lessons, especially for new teachers, but for everybody. All right. Yeah. And then I could go through a list of perverse incentives. It seems like the city council can use pressure tactics to get us to help them balance their own budget. It seems that good performance by the middle school now means we have a cut budget. That's perverse. Of course, the law requires we educate everybody and pay for all special needs, including special purpose private schools. And their incentive as profit-driven companies is to hike tuition. That's a perverse incentive that we live with. And then in this political climate, as I mentioned, there's this push to distribute everything equally, and that's perverse as well because we know that that does a disservice to some people. Thank you.
Yeah, member Hawkins.
And all of this having been said and agreeing with 90% of what I'm hearing here, I just want to say, and we've said it over and over and over through this whole process, none of us likes the idea of all these cuts we have to make. If this was the world it should be, we wouldn't have to make them. But in order to get this through and to keep our schools functioning the best we can, It's kind of like cutting an extra toe off just to make sure we can still fit in the shoe, even though the shoe is garbage. So I know it hurts the people that trust us. I know it hurts our teachers and our administrators and our students, but it looks like it's what we're going to have to do. And we are fully aware of how much it sucks because we sit with it every time we look at this budget book and go, oh my God, do we have to? So we feel it too. We're not ignoring the emails, we're not ignoring the conversations. But we're in the hole and we have to find a way out. And this looks like the ramp we're having to build.
Okay, Member Harper.
Um, I think just to add, I think Scott's, Member Harriman's request to see all the filled positions will give us just a good look at things. What's not included in that list are the like 7 mental health professionals that the district is losing because of federal grants sunsetting. And I am concerned. I see a little glimmer of hope with the potential bridge funding that is maybe going to come from the state. And I recognize that that might take like 3 weeks or something. So after that we might get news of that after we have to make a budget vote. So I don't know what to do with that. But I am very concerned about leaving the middle school with 1 social worker, for example. And I don't know what my request is. Like sort of, I guess, also maybe on that same projection of leaving the staff back in, a projection that includes those mental health positions so that we can just not look at them like they're not part of the equation. Yeah, it would Montello would also be left with 1 social worker. And yeah, I'm concerned about that as well.
Suppose that leaves me to add something. I unfortunately don't have any brilliant ideas. I do think, again, it is always easiest, I think, to see a couple options that we then try to piece together in a final motion. And, maybe one end is going to be what Member Harper was just referring to in terms of if we keep more positions in. On the other hand, with more positions coming out. The other reality, I think, and I don't have anything specific to add in terms of what positions to look at here or there. I will say I'm concerned, and this would be true actually, regardless of the revaluation, that because there is such a substantial increase, largely from costs outside of our control, that it could prove the budget that we put forward could prove unpopular with the voters. And I would hate for the district to be caught flat-footed in terms of what to do next if it does not move forward at the ballot box, which at least the year that it was voted down a couple of times, I think that had not happened in anyone's working memory. And so that turned out to be its own level of challenge of just figuring out how to even deal with that. I'm just saying that I'm not sure we need to, again, I think I want to be able to propose what I think is actually a responsible budget. It's not, slashing all kinds of positions. And so I don't want to suggest that, but I do at least want to know that the administration is considering kind of contingency plans, I suppose, for if we do end up having to reconsider, or even having to reconsider based on the city council review. So again, that's nothing specific. It's just trying to put out there that there's a lot of very challenging circumstances with this budget cycle. It's already a pretty difficult one. Adding in this revaluation uncertainty, it's a tough one. I know there are many folks have been emailing us, which is well appreciated, and there's folks here tonight, and I'm sure there will be at future meetings. And I suppose maybe my one ask there would be to not only give your message to us, the school committee, but also the people and voters and taxpayers of Lewiston, who are going to have the final say in terms of our budget. And I think that's what we all are trying to keep in mind as we are responsible with the budget. So that's all I have to say with that. Yeah, Member Glant.
Just one thing, when you listen to the news, Lewiston is not the only district that is going through this. Westbrook, South Portland, a lot of places are having to cut due to budget constraints. So we are not alone in having to do this. We're probably alone with the reevaluation on top of everything, but we are not alone in making some really hard choices. Throughout the state, districts are doing the same thing we're doing.
Member Harper, and then back to Member Bowden.
I don't know if it's possible to do, I know you asked at the very beginning of the meeting about public comment. I know that there's been like people who have come and gone. I don't know if it makes sense to ask again if there's folks who want to give public comment.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, but I'll see if Member Bowden has anything to add.
I actually was going to bring up public comment for Monday night, so I assume, I don't know, the agenda is going to include regular public comment on Monday. So I just want to encourage the voters in Lewiston who are going to be voting on this. If you have something to say, if there's things that you feel really strongly about, please come talk to us, because like other members here, I've received a lot of emails, but they're all from teachers and staff in our schools. They are not from Lewiston residents necessarily who are going to be voting on this budget. So that's who I think we really need to hear from, because I don't want to go through the same process of the referendum getting voted down 3 or 4 times in a row.
Did you have anything to add at this point?
No, I think I can put together packages based on this input. I'll do my best to have it organized and neat before Monday. It's not something I'll be able to share, obviously, in a packet tomorrow. But I will work diligently on this.
Okay. Do you mind at least adding it to the folder on Monday when it's prepared, just for members of the public, if they do access it that way, they can see in advance?
Yes, I'll have Cheryl add it as soon as I have it.
Thank you. So yeah, we can offer an opportunity for public comment now if anyone would like to speak. If anyone is planning to speak, please raise your hand or something. I can read the spiel. If not, I won't read the whole spiel about public comment. So would anyone like to give public comment now? Yes. Okay. All right. I'll be very quick about the public comment stuff here. Just to note that public comment does need to adhere to our public comment policy. And I'm just going to read the kind of important bits right now. Committee members and school staff, will not reply during this time. Comments must be directed to the chair and be civil. By law, comments may not pertain to specific staff or students. Comments about individuals must be directed privately to the appropriate staff, LPS staff. And I will add that does mean, referencing positively or negatively individual staff. Student privacy must be maintained. The public comment period is 30 minutes unless extended. Hopefully, it doesn't seem like we'll need that whole time. And members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes at this point. So please state your name, town or city of residence, and affiliation to LPS. And if you would please go up to the podium and turn on the microphone when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Meg Shrest, and I am an English teacher at the high school. And I'd like to take a moment tonight in response to some of the discussions I've been hearing to share what the first 15 minutes of my day at the high school looked like today. Before I officially started my student-facing time, just to contextualize my support for keeping all of our positions in the budget. So when I arrived at school this morning, I opened my laptop and I adjusted the slides I was planning to demonstrate a writing technique to my students with, using a tip that one of our technology coaches taught me last year. And I still had the email that she sent following up with step-by-step instructions, which made it really easy for me to apply the technique that I thought of on my way to work. I then followed up with one of our instructional coaches about some training I attended yesterday about our vertically aligned interliterature curriculum, and talked with her briefly about how we can bring some of the learning that happened yesterday back to our department. She's been really helpful, or they have been really helpful to me in actualizing a lot of the learning that's happened through our professional development. And after that, I went to the library where I saw a student who I've been really proud of for growing multiple grade levels in her reading this year, working with our library staff to choose her own independent reading book, which she then sat down and read with several friends. And when the library staff were done helping her, they helped me with a technology concern I'd been fielding over the last couple days and solved my problem within minutes. At this point, the bell was about to ring and I was returning to my classroom, and I saw a student I've been concerned about checking in with our school social worker. And then I saw them a few minutes later leaving that individual's office, just looking lighter and smiling for the first time in over 2 weeks. And I wanted to share that because it's not an atypical start to my day. The people, my colleagues at the high school and in this district, make a tremendous impact on me. And especially as a newer teacher, I'm really grateful to work in a community with such collective efficacy. And so I just wanted to take a moment to share what my morning was like, mostly because I've been reflecting on how I can imagine a similar morning happening next year if these cuts go through as proposed. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to give public comment? Okay. Any other comments or input from members of the committee before we wrap up? Yes, Member Reeves.
My question is about timing. So we have one more meeting on Monday, then a whole nother week, right, the 6th, and then the 7th is the city council presentation. So how are we going to do this?
So as of right now, you don't have a meeting on Wednesday, but it's the committee's decision, but I think you could have one if you felt it was needed. I'm available. I make myself available during these times because we just don't know what might pop up. We also do the same thing just for reference. Once we meet with the city council, sometimes they have input that we need to have meetings right after to weigh that input, and the school committee has to decide what it wants to bring back to the committee.
I don't have it in front of me, but can you remind me when the city council finally votes?
May 5th, they voted.
They
present on the 7th.
We presented on April 7th, but the city council doesn't take their final vote until May 5th. So there is some time. If we need to have, we should have a proposal to put forward by that point, but we don't necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't necessarily on this coming Monday need to take our final vote on the proposal. Yes, Member Bowden?
I would just ask though, the different proposals that you're going to make up for us, they absolutely need to be in the packet by Thursday, please.
That's tomorrow. I don't, that's not physically possible.
Okay. I just feel like it's something we need to have our eyes on, and we need to be able to think about and write notes down to ask questions by Monday, and not just see it for the first time Monday if we're talking about coming up with a final proposal to bring to city council next week.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, I don't want to push too far, and you can make multiple meetings, but would it be worthwhile to move? Well, Monday you have a regularly scheduled meeting anyway, because we have some typical agenda business items that we have to work through. Do you want to take up the budget on Wednesday? And see if there's any additional input on Monday, but having this turned around in packages with detail and what it means for impacts by tomorrow is, it's just not something I can do. But I hear what you're saying, like it's appropriate to have time to digest it and think about it. Does the committee want to do this a week from now so that it can be done well and put before you with days to think about it? Because I'm looking up at just the schedule and I already know what's in my calendar. I don't know how, even having it to you end of day Friday is going to be tricky.
What do members think about that? So it sounds like we're, the discussion being adding an additional meeting on Wednesday so that we can still take care of the regular business on Monday.
As soon as I can get it to you.
Is anybody currently present at least not able to do that? And we can confirm afterwards, but. Oh, sorry, yes, Member Hawkins.
I can make that work, and I may offer to bring coffee for you and Cheryl and your crew, because I know this is not a small ask on top of everything else you guys do.
Okay, so we'll confirm once we can also check with the other members, but it sounds like we should tentatively plan for a meeting. Yeah, both. So we already have one scheduled for this coming Monday, but we'll add one for Wednesday, just for good measure.
Is that April Fool's Day?
Yes, just kidding. We're not doing, no, yes, April Fool's Day, we'll discuss the budget. It is what it is. Yeah, okay. Any other input before we wrap this meeting? Okay, anything from the superintendent?
I appreciate the time to do it well and have a chance to consult with our leadership to make sure we're bringing you something that's well informed.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.